Hello everybody and welcome back to F1 2020, where we are back on the FRS My Team career mode playthrough. We are trading the city circuit walls of Monaco last week for the city circuit walls of Baku and Azerbaijan this time around. Now, after we made ourselves about the widest F1 car, keeping Valtteri Bottas behind us so much that he got frustrated and crashed into the back of us on our way to our second podium of the season in Monaco, we are now headed to another city circuit that's going to really test our ability to not get into the walls once again. However, Baku does have one of the longest full throttle sections on the entire F1 calendar on its main straight, so plenty of overtaking opportunity there. And of course, a tight technical little second middle sector there through the castle that is going to be very tough to keep wings attached. So another track where we're going to have to just be very careful to avoid any kind of damage picking that up, because otherwise that's going to add time to pit stops and we can lose out on positions. It's another track where alternative strategies can be viable. In 2019, in the F1 2019 game, most of the time if you started on softs, you were almost required to go to a two-stop strategy. I think in 2020 we may be able to make a soft to hard strategy work, and the AI may be able to do so as well. So we're just going to have to try and race ourselves as much as we can, close up, and of course it's going to come down to starting in qualifying. The car is improving. I think we're about the 5th or 6th fastest car on the grid according to performance, so that is going to help us out. We should start, bumping our qualifying up in that regard. And just, personally, my qualifying is definitely weaker than my race pace, so the car is kind of qualifying where it's at. I may look into I'm not going to quite look into difficulty changes just yet, just because the qualifying pace is about where I'd expect it to be on my skill level. It's just the race pace I tend to be a little bit quicker on. But here we are starting our first flying lap under the heavy braking zone of turn 1, over 200 miles an hour into that braking zone before you put the anchors on and slow way down for the 90-degree left-hander. We are looking at dry sessions all the way through the race weekend, so qualifying and race should be dry. So after the two first left-handed corners, we get our second DRS zone. A little blast as we head down to turn 3. A little bit of an overtaking opportunity, not ideal into turn 3, but you can, if you get that run out of turn 2, make it work. And now we're into sector 2 nearly, where the track starts to switch back and forth as there's the sector 2 split, and we go, obviously since we're one of the first cars out, the purple through the first sector there, setting the best time of the session that far. But now the track really narrows out as we have this long, very tight right-hand hairpin, and now into the narrowest section of the track, just about 8 meters wide, as we come through the castle section, avoiding all those barriers and now just trying to keep the back end in check. You have to run so much front end balance that you really get a little bit light on the rear end in those slower speed corners. You can make up for it in the high speeds off of the wings, which we do need for the final section there. But turn 15, that left-hander as we were getting ready to come down the hill, tricky braking zone, and then turn 16, the last real corner, because otherwise we are flat out the rest of the way. So here we're pitching it left and right, and we've clipped a bit of the wall there and turned in a little too early. But luckily it's just straight line the rest of the way for this lap. You see the speed climbing 208, 209, 210 miles an hour, 211 as we cross the start-finish line. And we could have come into the pit lane there, but we opted not to because we didn't have any more real corners to take. So the front wing damage wasn't going to hurt us too much down that. So we went ahead and kept that tie. But we're back out for our second run. New front wing on board the car here, and braking down into turn 1, taking that apex a little bit tighter, but we're down a little bit on the delta, not quite as quick through there. We'll see if we can make it up through the middle sector. We get a much better exit out of turn 2 there, and you can see that delta climbing still behind our previous best. But of course, we are going to make up a bit of time at the very end of the lap, because ideally we won't hit the wall and damage our front wing this time around. But as we are on our second lap, we are sitting provisionally P12 behind the two McLarens, ahead of Kimi Räikkönen and Esteban Ocon. The Renaults are kind of the performance measure for us the last couple of races, where we've had that similar pace, obviously excluding the pace in Monaco, where we just absolutely hooked up a lap. But as we come through the castle section here, and really this left-hander, the back end wants to just go on you. You just have to be so timid on the throttle through there, especially in race trim when you've got the heavier fuel loads. But we've made up a quarter of a second on our previous best time. Now picking up that braking zone for turn 15. Hug that right side of the wall as it juts out towards you, and then much cleaner through there. Huge time gain, now over a half a second, nearly 3/4. And we're a little slower on the exit, and that, unfortunately, we're going to carry a little bit of that time loss all the way to the scene of the previous accident, but we swing a little bit wider that time. We're able to avoid the barriers as we should, and now we're going to gain time for most of the way down the straight. Flip up on the DRS. This is the best overtaking opportunity on the track. You get that long slipstream, the DRS opens up, and you can see as we cross the start-finish line, we go into the 139s, and that puts us provisionally P5, so just ahead of the Racing Point of Stroll and Ricciardo. Now, as we are the first car out on the track, you can see the big queue of cars on the mini-map getting ready to start their final laps of the session. We are the first ones coming through as we are provisionally in 5th, starting for the final run here. So picking up some time, really sending it this time around through turns 1 and 2, opening up that DRS now, trying to pick up that braking point for turn 3, just ahead of that 100-meter board, and then on the throttle out of turn 3, and big wheel spin, the back end gets away from us, and we're into the barriers, and that is the end of that qualifying session for us, so unable to make any improvements, just pushing too hard.
With qualifying finished, it's time to remind ourselves of our top 3. Hamilton, Bottas, and Max Verstappen. Well, that wraps up qualifying, but don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow as we head into the Grand Prix.
Well, after the other cars put in their times, we qualify 11th place overall. Mahavir, though, down in 22nd, so he's going to have to work his way back up. We need him to start scoring points for the team.
A warm welcome to all of you watching at home to today's Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and a race that in its short history has already proven no stranger to drama. A 4th row start is just about as likely to give you a podium as a pole position would. And remember, in 2017 and 2018, both Lance Stroll and then Sergio Perez took surprise podiums here. With 20 turns and a length of 3.7 miles, Baku City Circuit in the heart of the Azerbaijan capital is a real test of a driver's endurance, patience and precision. 90-degree corners through Sector 1 lead into a tightening uphill sprint as we start to circle around the old city. Then a 1.4-mile chase flat out through Sector 3 towards the finish line. Anthony Davidson is alongside me as usual for the race today. Let's start with Racing Point. What do you make of their performance so far this season?
Well, the atmosphere within that team seems very positive at the moment. Everyone seems like they're in great spirits and having a lot of fun doing what they do, and that's definitely contributed to the performances we've seen.
It's time to see how our drivers are stacking up after yesterday's exciting qualifying session. Lewis Hamilton lines up on pole position, and it's Valtteri Bottas that completes the front row. Considering the rest of the grid, we have Verstappen, Ricciardo, Sergio Perez, and Leclerc, Vettel, Albon, Stroll, and Carlos Sainz. Oldtimer, Norris, Esteban Ocon, and Gasly, Raikkonen, Kvyat, Kevin Magnussen, and Antonio Giovinazzi, Russell, Latifi, Grosjean, and Mahavir Raghunathan. Now, it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track.
So here are starting P11 on the outside, so we get to avoid getting pinched against the wall. So we'll see if we can get a good run down into turn 1 as the lights go out, and away we go. And a good initial launch, good second phase. We're already closing up on Lance Stroll. We're beyond the McLarens, and then sending it around the outside. Puts us all the way up into 7th place, but we are in a bit of a drag race now with Leclerc down into turn 2, so we're going to leave him space on the apex there, swing around the outside, and maintain that position. Now we've got the slipstream on Daniel Ricciardo in front of us. We'll see. He's gotten a bit of a better launch out of turn 2 there, but we're not going to be quite close enough to make any kind of move, so we'll slot back in, enjoy our early race gains, and now it's all going to be about settling in as we are on the same tire compound as the cars ahead of us. But Vettel very slow as we're entering Sector 2. Had a little bit of a look around the outside of Ricciardo. We'll see, can we get our nose in? No, nowhere to really go there. That's going to compromise our run through the following corner and make us fall a little bit back off. But we are running a bit lower downforce setup for those long straights, so we are going to lose some time in the corners to the AI, but we should be able to make good use of it in overtaking and really the race trim of the car, but really just trying to nurse the tires around here. We want to try and save some tires in order to make that one-stop strategy much more viable around here. As usual, you can see we're running under-fueled. Plenty of opportunity to save fuel through that middle sector, as it is very stop and start, and you don't really need power from turn, about turn 3 to turn 9, essentially, around the track. So you can really save a lot of fuel. But now, here we are, trying to avoid the dirty air and the heavy fuel load the first time through these really quick switchbacks. Easy to make a mistake when you're on that heavy fuel load, but you can see already in the slipstream with that rich mix overtake on, closing up to Daniel Ricciardo. No DRS to start. We're going to see where he goes. We're going to look to the outside and try and go around. But we got a good run on Vettel as well, but we'll get on the brakes. Vettel covers off that line nicely. We have to swing wide around Danny Rick, but we're able to take the position from the Renault driver, and we're up into 6th place now using that straight line speed. And now we've got Sebastian Vettel, who's falling off the back of Max Verstappen a little bit. Next lap, the DRS will become enabled. We'll see, though, if we can attack him, much like we did Danny Rick last time around on the main straight. So it's all about maintaining that gap through this middle sector, which is where we are going to run in that leaner mix. We don't quite have the grip as well that the other cars do because of those downforce levels. But we still got plenty of pace to keep up and make it up down the straighter bits of the track. You can see we're already closing up to Sebastian Vettel, who is falling off the back of the Red Bull. And Sergio Perez really turning in a good season so far in the Racing Points. Has gotten in the mix of those front-running groups, but the Mercedes really controlling the season so far. You see, though, as we're closing up to Vettel, we haven't really been able to drop Daniel Ricciardo or Charles Leclerc, and then, of course, the other Red Bull of Alex Albon is just behind, but now all about getting that good run. Sometimes in the game you can kind of hop that turn 15 curb, but it is risky. For sure, because the car essentially gets up into the air as you cut that curb, and if you don't land it quite right and get it slowed down, you're into that barrier. It comes up very quickly. But switching back through the quick right left, Danny Rick has a little bit of a wiggle behind us there, but is able to keep it under wraps. We'll see as we get the just over the shoulder onboard shot. We'll see it looks like Sebastian is obscured by the mirror there. Coming up behind him into turn 1, not quite close enough to make an attack, though, this time like we did on Ricciardo last lap. So we will settle in. However, DRS has been enabled, so we will have DRS coming down this straight into turn 3. You see that rear wing flip open in the mirror, and we'll see, is it going to give us enough of a boost as we are closing on Sebastian Vettel into the braking zone, but just not quite enough to make it there. So unfortunately, we're going to be sitting here for the next half lap or so, until we get to the main DRS straight. He is well outside of that 1 second margin to Max Verstappen out ahead. And so he will not have that DRS help when we get to that main straight. Now it's tough to keep the tires in good nick when you're following that closely behind somebody. So that's why we really need to try and make this overtake as soon as possible. If we aren't able to make that overtake, it would probably be better for us to drop back a little bit, a couple of seconds, in order to try and conserve those soft tires. However, we would be under attack from the cars behind. Luckily, we have that straight line pace advantage, so we should be able to maintain good position even on the straights when we're defending over the course of this race, even with that DRS help. Here we are through the quick final corners, and now you can see the closing speed we have on Sebastian Vettel. Not even to the DRS zone yet. We're going to actually switch off our overtake as we're able to open up that rear wing and just send it right past him. No problem there, going over 200 miles an hour and into the braking zone for turn 1. Get it slowed down after using that overspeed from the DRS, and now Max Verstappen has made his way past Sergio Perez out in front of us. Now we've got to try and close up and see if we can get ourselves even closer to the podium positions. Running in the top 5 now after starting in 11th, after sending it around the outside on lap 1, turn 1, and then really closing up. But here we are jumping now to lap 7 of the race here, and we are getting the call from our engineer to come into the pits. Looks like we have a quick look at the tire life, and it looks like they're in okay shape, still starting to wear off, but we have closed up to Verstappen and Perez. So we are going to try and we've got plenty of front tire left. It's the rear tires that are the limiting factor, but we aren't yet over that 50% mark even. So we're going to essentially box opposite to the cars in front. If they stay out, we'll come in. If they come in, we will stay out and try and overcut them, because we are losing quite a bit of time following behind Perez and Verstappen like this. You can see just how slow we're having to go through the corners. So I think our tires are in better shape than theirs. And if they come in this lap, we might be able to make an overcut work, because we have a little bit of a rear end with Perez there. Might be a little bit of damage to the front wing. However, we haven't gotten any kind of damage warning. So here we go, down, coming out of the castle section. Finally, the track widens out a little bit. You can open up the throttle. These quick two left-handers, fully flat through here. Full commitment into the braking zone as you're coming down the hill. A little bit of a lift and coast, just because there's no real need for us to close right up to the gearbox of Perez into that one. We're within the DRS zone, within that 1 second of Sergio, who is going to get that help from Max Verstappen though. But now we're going to come and see, will they stay out or will they come in? The soft tires don't last very long around Baku here. It's a very high degradation track, but you're able to keep those rear tires in good shape, or as our right rear is just over 53%. We see both of those cars pulling to the left. We have that DRS off of Perez, so we are going to go ahead and stay out this time around. And now we're going to put in try and push a hard lap to come into the pits, try and make an overcut work, as we definitely had some extra pace in hand. We weren't losing the tires just yet. We do need to be a little bit careful in the traction zones though, as we are over that kind of 50% mark, and we are going to have less than ideal traction out of the corners, which tracks with these like 90-degree corners. Russia is another one where it's like this, those stop and starts really take a lot of life out of the rear tires, and so you can kind of lean on the front end of the car a little bit more into the corners and try and save the tires coming out of the corners. Normally you want to be slow into the corner, fast out, and you definitely want to do that for a few corners here, but in order to help out with the tire wear, there are a few corners at Baku as there's a big snap of oversteer there, the back end really getting wide. But as I was saying, you really want to kind of lean on the front tires. But we get into the barriers in the castle section. You saw a bit of the front wing end plate come off that front right, and that is going to be a fair amount of damage and likely will require a wing change. So pushing just a little too hard on this fast lap while we were trying to make the overcut stick, and I think that extra time will hurt us. As we are going to have to make a front wing change in our pit stop. So we will come in this lap for sure, make that front wing change, and we'll see where we filter back out. We were right on the gearbox of Verstappen and Perez just about the last time by, but we'll have to see where they come pitting-wise. There's nobody on the track around us. We are in totally clear air, as we were just well behind. But here we are into the pit lane, hard on the brakes, dive around that barrier, and then final bit of braking, lock it up a bit as we get it slowed down for the pit limiter. Now we trundle down at 80 kilometers an hour, headed towards our pit box, and it looks like another Racing Point and Red Bull. That'll be Stroll and Albon who are fighting, coming into the pits behind us in that rear view. But new front wing goes on, off the jacks, hard tires on, and away we go. And we will see where we can slot out. It looks like the Renault has gone by us, and we've lost that position there. But we are still ahead of both of the Ferraris, and it looks like Sergio Perez is 2 spots ahead of us. So Daniel Ricciardo on the soft tire. Either he's on the tires he started with, or he is going long, or he's going to be making a 2-stop. We do a little bit of weaving down the straights between turns 2 and 3 just to try and get some temperature into the tires. The hard tires really struggle with some warm-up, so we have to be very timid getting around the track this time until the rears especially get fully up to temperature. But you can kind of send in and throw the front end in a little bit more aggressively just to try and get that temperature in, but it's so tough, that outlap on the hards. You can see catching a bit of oversteer there, lots of short shifting to try and just keep the car in a good window. But the back end really loose through that complex, the right, left, before we get on the throttle. But now we should be starting to get those tires up to temperature. But we essentially came out about 3 seconds behind Sergio Perez, and that was after, taking an extra 4 seconds or so on the pit stop to make that front wing change. So we likely had the opportunity, without the damage, to come out ahead of Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen and make an overcut work on them. But unfortunately, we made a mistake, took some wing damage. We just need to try to not make any more mistakes the rest of the way, as we are running in 12th at the moment, but there are a few cars out of cycle that started on the medium compound tires that are going to be coming in. It looks like actually Esteban Ocon is essentially virtually leading this race as he's on the mini-map, that yellow dot ahead of the two Mercedes. We're up now to 12th as we pass an Alfa Romeo in the pit lane, I believe it was. And now we are closing up to Daniel Ricciardo. So he's on some soft tires that are wearing out, although he's also caught up behind Sergio Perez, who's on the hard. So if he is on going for a two-stop, he's really getting held up as there's a huge traffic jam ahead of us. Verstappen, Perez, and then you've got Pierre Gasly involved as Verstappen and Gasly battling it out side by side. And now when Gasly starting on the hard tires is out of sequence with us, so he is really going very long, or going long in his first stint to try and make the alternate reverse strategy work. But here we are. We've caught up to that pack, so luckily we didn't really lose too much ground to Perez, at least in the wing damage, just because they got caught up in traffic and we were able to come out in mostly free air and close up to the back of them, as we're now just about a second off of Perez, which when we came into the pit lanes, we were about 9/10 off. So once we can get Ricciardo out of the way, we should be able to close right back up to where we were before taking that wing damage. However, it looks like Verstappen has cleared Gasly, but Perez has not been able to, and you can see that gap opening up. So after Perez and Verstappen really battling through the first stint of the race, now necessarily going to open up a bit of a gap that Perez is going to have to find a way through. And of course, we are going to try and find a way through the cars ahead of us. We are right in the sandwich. We've got two Ferraris behind. We've got a bunch of cars ahead, as it looks like there's some overtakes being made ahead. We've got that DRS help, so swinging open, it looks like that's Pierre Gasly, I think, into the pit lane, so making his stop. And a big lockup from Ricciardo in front of us, who's going to the inside of Sergio Perez, making an overtake on him. We're going to see if we can slot in behind Ricciardo. No. We're going to see if we would follow him through, but now we are all over the back end of Sergio Perez. Very tight here. Unfortunately, Daniel Ricciardo does not have the DRS help down this straight into turns 2 and 3. Perez going to the outside. We're going wide to the outside. Daniel Ricciardo defending very hard. He makes contact with it. We go around 3 wide around the outside. We've taken 2 positions there as Ricciardo and Perez really battling it into that corner. And that opened up the door for us to just send it around the outside, well clear of them making any kind of mistakes. And now we're going to have to try and run away and see if we can get outside of the gap of Sergio Perez. Max Verstappen well outside that 1 second margin to us already. Now we just need Ricciardo to hold up Perez for a little while, as we're now running in what will be net 4th place overall in this one. So if we're able to clear that 1 second margin to Daniel Ricciardo, that will unfortunately put him under attack from Sergio Perez, who should be able to make a DRS move fairly easy. It might have been an interesting strategy to potentially try and hold Ricciardo inside the DRS range, just keep him at that 1 second margin at the detection point and use our better straight line speed just to kind of hold him off, and that way he'd have a fighting chance defending from Sergio Perez as well. He did stay within that 1 second of us this time around. So he is getting a little bit of help coming down, and you can see he's actually closing up to the back of us a couple of tenths down that straight. As we are running currently 8th place overall, but you can see Kevin Magnussen is just ahead of Max Verstappen. He's on the medium tires. He has yet to make his first pit stop of the race as well. Looks like both of the Haas's and Esteban Ocon are the 3 cars ahead that need to get out of the way. But we're going to jump ahead now to lap 18 of 26 in this one. And we've got Sergio Perez all over our gearbox. Verstappen is checked out. We aren't really catching him at all. We've got yellow flags in the first sector just behind us. And it looks like we're going to have a car pulling off as Carlos Sainz is the one who is out of the session. So we'll see, is that going to trigger a safety car? There is a runoff area right there at the exit of turn 2. And it looks like he may have gotten that car into that runoff area. So luckily, it looks like we're going to be able to dodge a safety car, although a safety car wouldn't have been the worst thing since we've already got cars all over our gearbox. It would at least allow us to close up to Max in front of us. but the two Mercedes have really checked out of this race. They're way ahead, nearly coming to turn 15 at this point, as Max is just kind of getting on the start of that series of left-handed kinks, and we are really just looking behind us at this point. We're trying to conserve fuel, conserve the tires. We really are having to dump a lot of battery power, a lot of extra fuel in order to keep Sergio Perez behind us at this stage of the race in order to maintain this 4th position, because the Racing Points are a relatively quick car in a straight line. We are running a little bit lower downforce than them.
Gap to car in front is 4.0
but
seconds.
it is definitely tough to keep that pink Mercedes behind us. You can see he's about 4/10 behind us only coming into the DRS detection point. So we are once again dumping the battery, dumping the fuel, trying to get that straight line pace. And you can see as he's now got that DRS help, we're going to go defensive to the inside at the moment, try and get him off the toe. We're going to move back to the outside as he's going to have the inside into turn 1. We're going to just go wide to carry the momentum around the outside. We left the door open for a potential dive, but I was banking on him not getting fully enough alongside to really make a strong attack. So we just carried that momentum around the outside of turn 1 and fought back. And now we're really in a position where we're having to save more fuel than the normal plan, because we've been having to spend so much of it keeping Sergio Perez behind us. So we need to find a spot to maintain. But here we are jumping ahead. Lap 21 now, as we are still in a bad position with fuel, and walk up as Sergio Perez now taking to the outside, and it's a bit of a drag race now into turn 2, and we're just slightly behind at the detection point. He does have to drop out as we have the inside line and kind of squeeze him out, but we were just behind at the detection point, so that's going to allow us to open up the rear wing and get a little bit of extra straight line speed down the back, and that's really helpful because that allows us to essentially run most of that straight in the lean mixture, save some fuel, because we still need to find a way to save about 20% of what we needed for the entire race distance over the next 5 laps. So we're running right at about that 10th of a lap or so short, and we of course dump a lot of it on the straights. But here we are now jumping ahead, lap 23 of 26, and still have that pink Mercedes for company, and he's got company as well in the form of a Ferrari, but he's going to have the DRS on us, and that'll help him defend from the Ferrari behind. But we are just going to continue to push as hard as we can in a straight line, having to do some lift and coast now to try and save some of that fuel. But that time, luckily, Perez not in a position to make any kind of move, so we're having to run in slightly lower engine modes, having to lift and coast into a few corners when we know we're safe from the overtake attempts from Sergio Perez. But we need to get that fuel margin. Otherwise, we're going to be running out of fuel at the line, which could be a bit of a problem if we go into that low fuel mode and lose that power coming into the last section of the lap. So we need to save where we can, and that's always the risk with running this strategy of under-fueling the car at the start. It does give you better tire wear and a good launch off the line, but if you find yourself in battle a lot, it's a real hard thing to get those fuel margins back into check. You can see 0.05 laps short, and we've only got about 2.5 laps left to save, as we are also starting to feel those hard tires degrade a bit. So the rear tires really getting more slippy at the end of this one. It's going to make the last bits very tough, but still that fuel mark is the big issue. We are able to regenerate quite a bit of battery per lap because there are such heavy braking zones, and we are using that overtake to kind of offset our fuel losses. But we essentially have no choice but to run in the rich fuel mixture down this back straight. Otherwise, we would be an absolute sitting duck for Sergio Perez behind us. You can see out front, Valtteri Bottas leading the race, Hamilton 21 seconds ahead of us, Verstappen nearly 6 seconds out, so he's 15 seconds behind the Mercedes. We're turning down in that fuel mode early on. A big lock up there, though. That's going to give Sergio Perez a little bit of a run, although he makes a bit of a mistake getting on the power, and that's going to allow Leclerc or Vettel alongside. And actually, Perez makes contact with us into turn 2 and nearly sends us into the outside. Well, luckily we were able to slow down and keep off of it, but that causes him to be very slow on the exit of turn 2, putting him at risk of Sebastian Vettel. Gives us a tiny bit of breathing room as there's only 2 laps left to go in this race. You see Verstappen has now opened up about 7 seconds to us, so losing quite a lot of time in that little bump. We did take a little bit of wing damage a couple of laps ago. You can see that end plate missing off the front left. Not as bad as it was in the early stages of the race when we had to come in for that wing change, but it definitely is something that is affecting our ability to get through the corners, and that's why you can see, even though Perez made that mistake into turn 2 and fell about a second back of us, he's already right back on our gearbox, because we are really having to manage not having that front end grip that we need, because that also, with the heavy braking zones coming from high speed, not having that extra bit of front downforce actually impacts our ability to get on the brakes as hard as we'd like. There isn't as much force pressing down on that front left. So especially into turn 1, it's much easier for us to lock up that front left tire if we are not careful. So we have to start braking a little bit earlier and be a little bit more gentle on the brakes with that little bit of front wing damage. But luckily, Sergio Perez is dealing with a very angry Sebastian Vettel, who is racing him very hard, and that's giving us a little bit of breathing room. As now Sebastian Vettel switching to the outside behind Sergio Perez, defending the inside. Are they going to make touch coming behind? It looks like they just avoid some wheel banging, but now it's side by side into turn 2, and Sergio Perez has the inside line and a little bit of contact between them, and that is going to help us out as we're starting the final lap of this race, running in 4th position overall, trying as we can to run away from the 2 cars behind us who are fighting it out. And it looks like, yes, the Ferrari has gotten through. That is Sebastian Vettel ahead of Sergio Perez, and now we've got Vettel bearing down on us. We'll see if Charles Leclerc, the other Ferrari, can make an attack on Sergio Perez before the end of this lap. But we are going to be in quite a bit of a DRS train, and we're going to be at the head of it. So we're trying to save fuel as much as we can through these little bits so we can dump everything we've got on that final straight. We're still very much flirting with disaster on running out of fuel in this one. You can see just how much Sebastian Vettel is all over our gearbox through that slow section. So hard getting on the throttle. He's gonna have a little look to the inside. We're gonna cover off just on the normal racing line as he had the momentum, has to kind of back out as he was not gonna get to there in time. And now braking into turn 15, the second to last braking zone of the lap, into the final braking zone, turn 16, keeping Vettel behind. Now it's all about getting that good launch, cranking everything up, but he is right on the back of us. He's going to have that DRS help into the final straight. Luckily, we don't have to beat him on the brakes at all. We just need to do enough in that straight line coming in. So here he is, DRS opening up for him. You see battery deployed out. Low fuel mode just kicked in, the checker flag out, the engine's sputtering, and we've just managed to maintain that position. We went right to the edge of both battery and fuel and managed to come home 4th place overall. So it ends our 2-race podium streak, but a good run through Baku, even with that wing damage, definitely showed some good race pace.
So Mercedes have won it, and what a great race it was. Tell me, Ant, how did they manage to achieve this win?
Well, this was a real team victory. They put together a solid strategy today that appeared well suited to the conditions out on track. The driver did everything that was expected of them in the moment to really execute the team's plan to perfection. A shining example of how F1 really is a team sport.
After an excellent performance at the Grand Prix, I'm sure there'll be plenty of celebrations tonight amongst the Mercedes team, and they certainly deserve it.
So Bottas, Hamilton, and Verstappen all on the podium. Bottas continuing that championship charge at the now about maybe 8 races into the season. So really that fight between the 2 Mercedes driver is getting very intense at this stage of the season.
Let's have a quick look at how the driver standings have changed. After an incredible performance, Lewis Hamilton secures the top spot in the Drivers' Championship. Let's focus on the driver of the day, Anthony Davidson. Who do you pick?
I have to give it to Old Timer. There was a lot going on all down the field, but they were the only one who I really felt maximised their potential.
Let's move on to the constructors. Mercedes continue to extend their lead. It was also a strong Grand Prix from Haas F1 this weekend. Fantastic work from the American team to move themselves further up the table. And with that, we wrap up another weekend of motorsport. But with more races lined up, be sure to join us when we come back with more Formula One.
Max Verstappen really running out in kind of no man's land, 17 seconds off the lead, but really turning into a tight battle. We've moved up to 5th overall, which is pretty great for us there. But Lewis Hamilton still just in the lead of the championship ahead of his teammate Valtteri Bottas. It's a very close fight going on so far, but Hamilton took the win in Monaco, but Bottas taking those full 26 points, getting that fastest lap point as well around Baku. So Mercedes really going to be taking lumps out of each other, and that's might allow Max Verstappen, if he can break through and get some wins, to close up to that gap. But it's definitely Mercedes running away with it at this stage. So we're going to pop into the R&D. We did a quick thing with the activity, only had 2 days to assign, so we put in some second driver training as well. We'll reactivate the failed component upgrade, and now we're going to see where we can spend the points that we've got left. We don't quite have enough for any of the major upgrades, so we're going to take a look at some of the minor upgrades. It looks like it's going to be one of the aero upgrades, because chassis we need to further develop. We need to further develop the department before it'll allow us any more upgrades. So we've got some money in the bank. We're going to take a look and see where we can spend it most intelligently. Chassis could probably use it. Really, every department could use some of the upgrades, but we do have to worry about coming up to our teammate's renewal, 28 days, and he's got a $1 million market value and a buyout. So we'll see. Should be able to spend some money and make that back up before, but I've been in a position in previous playthroughs where I foolishly upgraded a facility right before the second driver's contract was up for renewal, and I had to bail out. I had to go essentially change for a very cheap driver, and it definitely hurt our point scoring there. But we're just throwing on the old practice power units there. So yeah, it looks like vehicle performance, we are about the 6th fastest car on the grid at this stage. So we'll continue to upgrade the car, and also our simulators and our personnel development before we head up to Canada, which is the next race coming up, which should be a very interesting one. Always has plenty of opportunity for weather to play a factor. It's one of the tracks I was probably the most confident with in the league this last season. Definitely had a tremendous improvement on my pace at Canada between seasons 2 and 3. So it's definitely a track I feel fairly handy around. And it's another one with some long straights. So we'll be running more of those low downforce setups. And it's got a very short pit lane. So the 2-stop strategy is viable around there, because you don't lose a lot of time in the pit lane because it cuts some very slow corners. So we'll see what we can do with that coming up, and just making sure that our power units and stuff are all good. We seem to, we get our free order of a practice gearbox. No penalties taken there, but since that's getting to about 50%, we might start to see some issues. So we'll just head that off. It doesn't cost us anything, doesn't hurt anything there, but we'll continue to keep an eye on the power units throughout the practice sessions, and make sure that we're in a good position for the rest of the season to try and take as few grid penalties as we possibly can. But thank you for joining me on this one. We will head to Canada next. I look forward to a good race there. See y'all later. Peace.